I want to thank you all for coming out here. You're really at the wrong spot. You should be down at the IRS Commissioner's office and asking him why all of this is going on. Ask him to show you the law that requires you to pay this federal income tax. He won't be able to do it. The closest thing he'll come to is they say, well, you have to pay it because we've shown that through the courts. They say you have to. When you have a government that enforces non-law passed by your Congress, you're run by a king, and it usually ends up very tyrannical. Where are we at now? George Bush says he don't care what Congress says. He's the king. He's the president. He's going to do what he wants. George Bush does not represent me at all. He's a criminal. What he is, he should be indicted for war crimes. My grandpa Harvey Weaver one time said government just like a garden. It needs to be weeded every now and then. You want to know why he said that? I didn't know for a while, but I figured it out since. This lady here was my wife of almost 20 years. She was a very intelligent lady. The best mother I knew, the best wife I knew. Homeschooled her children. And my oldest daughter, one example, I won't go through all of them. One example, my oldest daughter, she taught her through the 8th grade. When I went to jail and they sent my daughters back to Iowa, they put Sarah in the 11th grade in high school. She hadn't been to school for a couple of years, so we thought she was done. Went into 11th grade and graduated with 3 scholarships. The other kids were just as good. I'm not going to go through all that. Very sweet lady, and when they shot her, she was holding, now this baby here was my oldest daughter. That's a picture of my wife holding my oldest daughter, Sarah, who is now 31. But she was holding my youngest daughter, Elizabeth, just about the same way. When they shot my wife through the head, Elizabeth was right here, and when I picked her up from underneath my wife's body, she had jawbone, glass from the window pane, and blood all over. I thought she was wounded or dying too. That's one reason we need to weed the government now and then, because they take orders to enforce non-laws. These people are here under non-laws, and we were too. I was originally on a gun law, but the U.S. Marshals were up there to get me on a failure to appear. I got paperwork I can show you. I had the wrong court date. By the time they claimed I was a wild crazy man up in the mountains and the U.S. Marshals going to come get their man, that's the last straw. I got mad. And my wife was mad and my kids were standing behind me. And we said, this is it, we ain't going to deal with you no more. What makes people willing to put their lives on the line? They'll take so much BS from the so-called government, the de facto government, and then they just say back off. And this is just what's happening right here. I ain't afraid of dying no more. I'm kind of curious about the next life, and I'm an atheist. My son Sam, this picture, he was 11 years old. He died 3 years later. U.S. Marshals shot his dog, a yellow Labrador, when the dog was running home. They autopsied the dog, which the U.S. Marshals didn't realize they would do. They wouldn't mess with the dog there. His story was the dog was attacking him. Well, apparently in North Idaho, yellow Labradors, they attacked running backwards because he was shot right up the rear end. It come out his spine here and went through his right ear. He was running up the road toward home. He'd already passed these goons. But their job that day on our property was to kill this dog because he had a big mouth, kind of like me, I guess. And they wanted to silence him. Sam said, you shot Stryker. You SOB. I'll give you the exact words. Well, I'm going to abbreviate it. And he fired 2 rounds in this undercover camouflage U.S. Marshal's direction that he just saw shoot his dog, and he turned to run for home. Another marshal who's from Boston, Mass., not too far from here, he shot this little fella in the right arm, about blew his arm off the elbow. Sam yelled, oh shit. Now I'm telling you what my friend Kevin Harris and his stepbrother, he was there to witness this. He said, Sam yelled, oh shit. Come on, Kevin. The U.S. Marshals that were shooting at Kevin at the same time, Sam had shot these 2 rounds at the U.S. Marshals. Kevin fired 3 in their direction while he was being shot at. So there's 5 rounds fired between my sons. They fired a total of 14 rounds. They didn't hit Kevin, but Kevin heard it when they hit Salmon's back. It was like, he said, it sounded like when somebody punched in the back real hard, takes the wind out of you. Well, later on, it had blown his heart right out. When I picked him up off the ground dead, chunks of meat was falling out of his mouth. His little eyeballs was halfway open and rolled back, and the whites, you don't forget that stuff. After they shot Sam, a U.S. Marshal was shot and killed, and I honestly believe in my heart, they have never proved otherwise, it was friendly fire. They can't admit that. They won't admit that. That's even, think how much worse that is than blaming it on one of us. They blamed his death on my stepson. Said my stepson did it. Well, he'd come out in court. He didn't do it. They even showed one of his men's, they showed his backpack, and it had one bullet hole going through it sideways, and proved that that came from that silent submachine gun from the guy behind him who was supposed to have killed the dog with that to start with when we weren't present.